In the cold vastness of space, humanity had once been masters of their own world, reaching the stars and forging alliances with powerful alien civilizations. But everything had changed when war came to Earth. It was a war unlike any other, a war where humanity faced an enemy unlike anything they had ever encountered. The first wave of the alien invaders descended without warning. They came from the stars, their ships gliding silently through space, their weapons more advanced than anything humans had ever seen. The world was unprepared, and within hours, cities fell, and humanity was forced to fight for survival. In the midst of this chaos, Earth's governments collapsed. The leaders, unable to withstand the relentless assault, were overwhelmed, and the people were left to fend for themselves. The once proud nations of Earth were no more. The surviving humans were scattered, desperate, and hopeless, struggling to survive in a world that had been torn apart. They had been given no chance to prepare, no chance to defend themselves. The invaders had come with one goal: to wipe humanity off the face of the Earth. As the war raged on, it became clear that the aliens were not just invaders, they were conquerors. They had the power to destroy entire cities in an instant, to wipe out millions of lives with a single blow. Every attempt to fight back was met with overwhelming force. The human soldiers, though brave, were no match for the alien technology. The aliens unleashed their weapons, and one by one, the great cities of Earth fell to their might. No corner of the planet was safe. It wasn't long before the planet itself began to feel the strain. The environment, once thriving, was now dying under the constant bombardment. The air became thick with smoke, and the oceans churned with the debris of broken cities. The survivors struggled to breathe, to find food, to find shelter. It was a world on the brink of collapse. Then came the final blow. The alien forces, having conquered all of Earth's major cities, set their sights on the last hope for humanity, the spaceports. The surviving humans had gathered their resources, building ships capable of carrying them to distant worlds. It was their only chance for survival. But the aliens knew this, and they moved swiftly to destroy the spaceports before any ships could take off. The final escape missions began in a desperate bid for survival. The humans who managed to board the ships were the last of their kind. They left behind their homes, their families, and everything they had ever known. As the ships rose into the dark sky, the ruins of Earth faded from view, replaced by the endless void of space. The survivors looked back one last time, but all they saw was a dying world. The Earth that had once been their home was no more. Out there, in the cold expanse of space, the survivors had no idea where they were going. They only knew that they had to escape, that they had to survive. But they were not alone. There were others out there, powerful and ancient civilizations, that had watched humanity rise and fall. These civilizations had once welcomed humanity, but now they saw the humans as a threat, a reminder of their own past failures. The survivors were no longer welcomed. They were cast out by the stars, forced to wander through the emptiness of space. Among the survivors, a new leader emerged, a figure who had once been a low-ranking officer in the military, but who had risen to prominence in the wake of the destruction. His name was Jace, and he was determined to lead the survivors to safety, to find a place where humanity could rebuild. He was not the first choice of the people, but in a world where everything had been torn apart, there were few who could offer hope. Jace had a vision. He believed that humanity could rise again, that they could build a new civilization far away from the destructive forces that had torn their world apart. He gathered the survivors together and began to formulate a plan. It wasn't much, but it was all they had. They would search for a new home, a new world where they could start over. But Jace knew that it wouldn't be easy. The universe was vast and full of dangers, and they had no idea what lay ahead. As they traveled through the darkness of space, they encountered strange, hostile forces. Some of these forces were alien civilizations who saw humanity as weak and beneath them. Others were remnants of the once great human empire, now broken and lost. But through it all, Jace never wavered. He believed that humanity had a right to survive, that they could rebuild what had been lost. In the first few months of their journey, the survivors faced countless challenges. They had to fight for every inch of space they traveled, encountering hostile alien ships and treacherous cosmic storms. Every day was a battle for survival, and the survivors began to feel the weight of their loss. Earth was gone, their homes were gone, and all they had left was a small fleet of ships and a dream of a new future. But as they ventured deeper into the unknown, something unexpected happened. They discovered an ancient, hidden planet, a place untouched by the wars and destruction that had ravaged the galaxy. It was a lifeless world, but it was a world with potential. The survivors began to see it as their chance to rebuild. It was here that Jace made his decision. They would make this forgotten planet their new home, and they would rise again from the ashes of Earth. But even as the survivors began to settle into their new world, Jace could not shake the feeling that they were being watched. The stars had cast them out, but were they truly free? Was there a greater force out there, waiting to strike them down? The war had been brutal, but Jace knew that humanity's true test had only just begun. In the shadow of their new world, they would have to build a secret empire, hidden from the prying eyes of the universe. It would be a place where humanity could thrive, but it would not come without sacrifice. The survivors would need to keep their existence a secret from the alien forces that sought to destroy them. And in the darkness of space, far from Earth, they would have to fight for their future, one battle at a time. The fall of humanity was not the end. It was only the beginning. The survivors of humanity, now scattered across a dozen ships, slowly began to realize the magnitude of their situation. Their escape from Earth had been nothing short of a miracle, but they couldn't ignore the fact that they were wandering in the unknown. The stars, once a symbol of hope and exploration, now seemed distant and cold. The wreckage of their former lives, drifting behind them in the vast emptiness of space, was a constant reminder of what they had lost. Jace, the leader of the survivors, stood on the command deck of the largest ship, staring out into the endless expanse. His hands gripped the rail tightly as he watched the stars streak by. They had no destination, no plan, just the hope that something, anything, was out there that could offer them a chance for a new beginning. But with every passing day, the weight of their situation grew heavier. The galaxy was a vast and dangerous place, and they were alone. But Jace refused to let fear take hold. He knew that humanity had survived worse. It was during this uncertain journey that they encountered something unexpected, an ancient alien structure on the surface of a desolate planet. The planet was located in a remote corner of the galaxy, far from any known star systems. The humans who first discovered it thought it was just another lifeless world, an empty rock with nothing to offer. But as they explored the planet, they found something that would change their fate forever. The structure was massive, sprawling across the surface in a way that suggested it had been there for millennia. The walls were covered in strange symbols, and the materials used to build it were unlike anything humanity had ever seen. It seemed as if the planet had once been a hub for some ancient civilization, one that had long since vanished. As the survivors made their way deeper into the structure, they discovered that it wasn't just an abandoned relic. It was a treasure trove of forgotten technology. Inside the structure, they found weapons, energy sources, and most importantly, data, an enormous archive of alien knowledge. For the first time since the fall of Earth, humanity had access to something that could help them survive. Jace knew that this discovery was more than just a chance for survival. It was their opportunity to rebuild. The technology they had uncovered could give them the tools they needed to not only survive, but to grow stronger than ever before. But not everyone saw the discovery in the same light. Some of the survivors were deeply uneasy about using alien technology. They had seen firsthand how dangerous the universe could be, and the thought of relying on the same technology that had helped bring about their downfall on Earth was unsettling. They questioned whether it was worth the risk. What if this technology led them down a dangerous path? What if it attracted the very enemies they were trying to escape? Despite the concerns, Jace moved forward with the plan. He saw no other choice. Without this technology, they would remain vulnerable, stuck on this barren world with nothing but the remnants of their broken civilization. He believed that this was their chance to rise again, to build something new and strong, something that would ensure humanity's survival. The survivors worked tirelessly to understand the technology, and over time, they began to unlock its secrets. They reverse-engineered energy shields, improved their ships, and developed advanced weapons that would give them a fighting chance against any threat they encountered. Slowly but surely, the humans began to rebuild. They started to create a new society, one that was more than just a collection of survivors. They began to see themselves as something more, an empire. But as their empire grew, so did the dangers. The first sign came when a fleet of alien ships appeared on the edge of their system. These were not the same aliens that had attacked Earth. They were different, older, and much more powerful. Jace knew they had to act quickly before the alien forces discovered what they were building. If the Empire was exposed, they would be crushed before they even had a chance to fully establish themselves. The survivors had no choice but to go into hiding. They could not afford to let anyone know about their new home, their new empire. The technology they had uncovered was a blessing, but it was also a curse. If the wrong people found out about it, they would be doomed. The survivors began to work in secret, building their empire behind closed doors, hidden from the prying eyes of the universe. The alien fleet that had appeared on the horizon proved to be a constant threat, but Jace had a plan. They would not engage them directly. Instead, they would stay hidden, gathering strength until the time was right. They would create a secret empire, one that could stand strong in the shadows, waiting for the day when they could strike back. It wasn't an easy task. The survivors had to remain vigilant, constantly on the lookout for any sign of danger. They knew that if they were discovered, the consequences would be devastating. Every day felt like a battle, as they worked to build something that would ensure their survival in a galaxy that had no place for them. They could not afford to make mistakes. But even in the midst of this secrecy, Jace remained determined. He refused to let fear control them. Humanity had been cast out by the stars, but they would not be defeated. They would rebuild, stronger and more united than ever. And when the time came, they would emerge from the shadows and show the galaxy that humanity was not to be underestimated. As they continued to work in secret, the survivors couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every movement, every decision was scrutinized. Jace knew that they could not stay hidden forever. The universe was vast, but not vast enough to escape the attention of the ancient civilizations that watched from afar. The threat was always looming, but Jace's resolve never faltered. He would protect the future of humanity, no matter the cost. But as the days passed and the Empire grew stronger, Jace began to realize something even more disturbing. They were not just building an empire to survive. They were building something far more dangerous. The technology they had uncovered was powerful, yes, but it also had the potential to corrupt them. As they tapped into the hidden knowledge of the ancients, they began to understand the true cost of their actions. The more they learned, the more they realized that the path they had chosen might not lead to salvation after all. The secret empire that Jace had hoped would be their salvation was starting to feel more like a prison. And the deeper they went into the unknown, the more Jace began to question if they had truly escaped the past, or if they were simply walking into a new form of darkness. The empire was growing, but so were the secrets that surrounded it. What had they truly uncovered in the ruins of that alien world? And could they ever escape the shadow of the forces that had once destroyed them? As the secret empire continued to grow, so did the division among the survivors. What had begun as a small group of desperate people had now evolved into a complex society. But not all of the survivors agreed on how things should be done. Jace, the leader, had made tough decisions to ensure their survival, but some of the survivors were starting to question his methods. The technology they had uncovered from the alien structure had made them more powerful, but it had also given rise to new fears and suspicions. The rebellion began quietly at first. A small faction of the survivors, mostly military officers and scientists who had once been close to Jace, began to speak out against the direction the Empire was taking. They feared that they were repeating the same mistakes that had led to Earth's destruction. They worried that humanity's reliance on alien technology could turn them into something no different from the invaders who had once destroyed their world. The rebellion was led by a man named Malik, a former high-ranking officer who had once worked closely with Jace. He believed that humanity needed to return to its roots, to build their future without relying on alien knowledge. Malik's movement quickly gathered support. Many of the survivors, especially those who had lost loved ones to the war and the collapse of Earth, felt that they had been pushed too far by Jace's vision. They remembered a time when humans had been independent, self-sufficient, and free from the influence of foreign powers. Now they felt like they were no better than the invaders who had destroyed their world. To them, Jace had become a symbol of everything they had fought against, a man who had abandoned the principles that made humanity strong. Despite these growing tensions, Jace remained resolute. He knew the stakes were high. The empire they were building was humanity's last hope for survival, and he couldn't afford to let anyone stand in the way of progress. But the rebellion was growing stronger, and Jace's leadership was being questioned more and more. The fragile unity of the survivors was on the brink of collapse. One day, as Jace stood at the command center, a chilling message arrived. An alien fleet, unlike any they had seen before, had entered the system. These were not the same forces that had attacked Earth, nor were they the same as the fleet that had once been spotted near the planet. This was something new, something ancient. The survivors quickly realized that they had not been as hidden as they thought. The alien fleet was massive, far larger than anything the humans had been able to face. It moved through space with a precision that suggested it had been tracking them for some time. The survivors knew that if this fleet was allowed to discover their location, their empire would be destroyed before it could even be fully realized. But there was a deeper concern that gnawed at Jace's mind. These aliens were different. They weren't just here to conquer. They were here to eradicate. The message they received from the fleet's leader was chilling. "We have watched you," the voice said, cold and emotionless. "We have seen what you have become. You will not survive the consequences of your actions. Your time is at an end." Jace's heart sank. These aliens were not like the invaders who had destroyed Earth. They were older, more powerful, and they had an agenda that was beyond simple conquest. This was a race of beings who saw themselves as the true rulers of the galaxy, and they viewed humanity as a dangerous aberration. They had come to ensure that humanity would never rise again. As the alien fleet approached, Jace realized that the time for hiding was over. The rebellion, now on the verge of becoming an all-out civil war, had to be put on hold. The survival of humanity depended on their ability to unite and face the threat before them. But how could they fight back against such a powerful force? Jace made the difficult decision to approach Malik and his followers. He knew that the rebellion was a threat to the survival of the Empire, but he also understood that they were a valuable resource. Malik and his people were highly skilled in combat, and they knew how to fight against powerful forces. Jace had no choice but to make an alliance with them. The future of humanity depended on it. When Jace met Malik in person, the tension between them was palpable. The two men had once been close friends, but now they were enemies on opposite sides of a growing divide. Jace extended an olive branch, offering Malik the chance to join forces. The rebellion, he said, could help defend the Empire. But Malik, distrustful of Jace's methods, was hesitant. "We cannot rely on the technology that brought us here," Malik said, his voice filled with frustration. "We cannot let it control us. You've already given too much of humanity's future to the aliens. What happens when we become the very thing we fought against?" Jace's eyes hardened. "I didn't choose this path lightly, Malik. But we have no choice. These aliens, whatever they are, will destroy us if we don't work together. And if we fall, humanity falls with us. Malik hesitated for a moment, then nodded. I'll help you, Jace. But you need to understand, if we survive this, we will have to rebuild humanity differently. We can't let alien technology define us. We can't let it shape who we are. Jace knew that this alliance would be difficult. The survivors were fractured, their unity shattered by the rebellion. But the enemy was too great for them to fight alone. Together, they would have a chance, maybe the only chance to defend their new empire. But even as they prepared to face the alien fleet, Jace couldn't shake the feeling that something darker was lurking just beyond the horizon. The stakes were higher than ever, and every decision now carried the weight of humanity's future. The survivors scrambled to prepare for the impending battle. The secret empire, which had been built in the shadows, would now have to step into the light. Jace and Malik worked together to strengthen their defenses, drawing on both the Empire's advanced technology and the Rebellion's combat skills. They would make their stand on the edge of space, in the cold emptiness where no one had ever dared to fight before. As the alien fleet drew closer, the tension in the air grew thick. Every survivor knew that this would be their greatest test. They had come so far, rebuilt so much, but now everything they had fought for was on the line. Would they survive, or would they be wiped out like so many civilizations before them? Jace's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the alarm. The alien fleet had entered their system. The time for waiting was over. The final battle for humanity's future had begun. The alien fleet loomed large in the sky above them, its ships gliding through the void with a terrifying precision. The survivors were now fully aware that their time to act had come. Jace stood in the command center of their largest ship, staring out into the cold expanse of space. The fleet was massive, a sight that could crush anyone's spirit. But Jace's resolve was unshaken. This was the final stand for humanity. Beside him, Malik and his rebellious forces had joined the effort. Though the distrust between them still lingered, they had put their differences aside for the moment, recognizing that their survival depended on unity. The technology they had uncovered from the ancient alien structure was their best weapon, but it wasn't enough on its own. The human spirit, their determination, their will to survive, was what they would rely on most in this battle. We don't know exactly what they're capable of, Jace said to Malik, his voice firm yet tinged with concern. But we do know one thing, they will not stop until we are destroyed. Malik nodded gravely, his eyes scanning the tactical map. We can't fight them head-on with the strength we have. We have to outsmart them, use their arrogance against them. The plan was simple yet dangerous: divide and conquer. The fleet would break into smaller groups, each one striking at the alien ships from different angles. They would create confusion, draw the alien forces into traps, and exploit the weaknesses in their technology. It wasn't the ideal approach, but it was the only one they had. As the first wave of battle began, the humans engaged the alien ships in a flurry of fire and chaos. The survivors' ships, armed with the advanced alien technology they had recovered, were fast and nimble. They darted in and out of enemy formations, firing with precision and evading the alien weapons. For a while, it seemed like they might actually stand a chance. The aliens, taken aback by the ferocity of the humans' defense, struggled to respond effectively. But soon, it became clear that the aliens were holding back, toying with the humans rather than attacking with full force. Their ships were seemingly invulnerable, their weapons devastating in their power. Each blast from the enemy's guns tore through the survivors' ships, and despite their best efforts, they were losing ground. "We need to hit them harder," Jace shouted as explosions rocked the command deck. "The longer we drag this out, the more we'll lose." Malik, who had taken command of a separate group of ships, spoke through the comms. "I've got an idea, Jace, but it's risky. I'll need a distraction to get close enough." Jace didn't hesitate. "Whatever it takes, Malik. Just get it done." The survivors knew they were outmatched, But they also knew they had one advantage: their knowledge of alien technology. The ships they piloted had advanced shields and weapons, but their greatest asset was the alien energy source they had recovered. The plan was to overload the energy core of one of their ships, creating a massive explosion that could take down a portion of the alien fleet. It was a desperate move, but it was humanity's only shot at turning the tide. Malik's ships moved in, weaving through the alien formation and drawing fire away from the rest of the fleet. Their ships swerved and dipped, dodging laser blasts as they distracted the alien forces. Meanwhile, Jace's ship, along with several others, prepared for the final phase of the plan: the attack on the alien flagship. Jace's hands gripped the controls as he focused on the massive alien ship ahead. It was more advanced than anything they had seen, but he knew its weaknesses. The energy core, hidden deep within the ship's hull, was their target. If they could breach it, they could disable the entire fleet. The question was whether they could get close enough to strike before the aliens realized their plan. "On my mark, everyone," Jace said, his voice steady but filled with urgency. Now. The survivors launched themselves forward, charging at the alien flagship with everything they had. The alien ships moved to intercept, but they were already outnumbered. The human strategy was working. Confusion reigned among the alien forces as they tried to adapt to the rapid, unpredictable movements of the survivors. Jace's ship broke through the outer defenses of the flagship, narrowly avoiding a devastating blast. He could feel the energy building in the ship as they closed in on the core. Every second felt like an eternity, but he knew that if they failed, it would all be over. With one final burst of energy, Jace's ship flew through the breach and into the heart of the alien ship. The alien energy core flickered before exploding in a brilliant flash of light, sending shockwaves rippling across the battlefield. The explosion tore through the alien fleet, disabling dozens of ships in a matter of seconds. The survivors' ships quickly turned the tide, attacking the now disoriented aliens with everything they had. In the chaos, the remaining alien forces began to retreat, their once mighty fleet broken and in disarray. But the victory didn't come without cost. Many human ships had been lost, their crews sacrificed for the greater good. Jace watched as the last of the alien ships fled into the void. Their pursuit finally ended. The survivors had won the battle, but at what cost? Humanity had suffered, and they had been forever changed by the war they had endured. The universe, once a place of possibility, now seemed like a cold, uncaring expanse. There was no going back to the world they had known before. The survivors gathered together in the aftermath, the silence of space now echoing their triumph and loss. Jace stood at the helm, his eyes scanning the wreckage of the battlefield. His thoughts were heavy with the realization that their journey was far from over. Is this the end or the beginning? Jace asked himself, his voice barely a whisper. Malik approached him, weary but resolute. It's not the end, not yet. We've won today, but the galaxy is still out there. And so are the forces that would destroy us. We may have been cast out by the stars, but we've shown them that we will never stop fighting. Humanity will rise again. Jace nodded, his gaze turning toward the stars. They had been cast out, but they had proven that they could survive. They had built a secret empire, not just to survive, but to reclaim their place in the galaxy. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: humanity was no longer a victim. They were a force to be reckoned with. And with that, the survivors began the difficult task of rebuilding. They would create a new civilization, stronger and more united than before, and they would do it in the shadows, hidden from the galaxy's prying eyes. But one day, when the time was right, they would rise again, and this time, they would not be cast out. This time, they would take their place among the stars. The galaxy would never forget the humans who had been cast out, and neither would the humans. They had been broken, but they would never be defeated.